Good afternoon. Welcome to the second podcast for with the theme of Level Up Workforce Productivity with Adobe. My name is Jim Rutt. I'm the CIO and CISO of the Dana Foundation here in New York City, and I'm pleased to welcome Deepak Bharadwaj, the Vice President of Product at Adobe. We're going to continue the conversation around Acrobat AI. It's Acrobat AI Assistant, I should say more specifically. We've got a number of great questions to follow up on the last podcast that we did with Alex. And so why don't we just jump into it? Deepak, any kind of intro you want to give about yourself before we get started?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me on. And it's great to be continuing the conversation. I did get a chance to see the podcast that you and Alex did. Very informational, hopefully, for our listeners. So just by way of introduction, I head our product management, product strategy functions here at Adobe for our document cloud portfolio. So that's Acrobat, Acrobat Sign, Acrobat Services, which is our API platform. And super excited about what we're doing with GenAI. We believe it's transformational, and let's get into it.
Super. I'm glad to hear you've got a strong hand in the API side, because that'll be a question down later in the podcast.
Sounds great.
So the first one. So the launch was about a month ago. I've certainly been impressed with the product from what I've seen. Can you give me your high-level insights on the general response that you've been getting from the customer base?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jim, we are seeing tremendous response, a lot of excitement, a lot of energy, both directly hearing from these customers as well as what we're picking up in terms of the data that we look at as it relates to usage, as well as just a lot of buzz in the social community as well. And as you know, we have kind of a couple of different flavors of the beta program that we launched. We have a public beta that we launched for what we call our individual and teams users. So these are usually folks in smaller organizations or individual users that are using it for personal use. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have what we call a private beta, where we're working with larger enterprise type organizations, just like ourselves here at Adobe. And we are helping them unearth value with their use cases in a separate beta program. And so the feedback has been awesome in terms of how folks are starting to use it. So just a couple of quick examples. The easiest one is student. I have a couple of them here at home, two girls, teenagers, and great for them to be using this when they're preparing for their exams, especially when they're trying to get their head around topics that they are not as familiar with or just need a deeper level of understanding, right? So being able to chat with that PDF document and get their questions answered is super beneficial for them. And it's not so much about time savings where you're trying to find information and hunt and peck. We are really focusing on getting the users deeper insights and high quality answers to questions, high quality summaries, and ultimately being able to use that to generate additional content like emails and narratives for presentations and so on and so forth. So the student use case is an easy one. If you're an SMB, a small medium business, it's tax time right now, right? So let's say you own a catering business, you're trying to figure out what you need to deduct. There's all these publications from the IRS. They all are PDFs. And so we've got users that are trying to get their questions answered by using the assistant. And then we've got some, as we move up the spectrum, specialized use cases with, let's say you are a regional bank. We have one of those that we're working with, and they are trying to figure out the credit worthiness of a municipal bond for investment purposes. And these again tend to be PDF prospectus, and so they are downloading those and using the assistant to unearth insights. And then last but not the least, you've got larger organizations where all sorts of front office and back office functions are able to leverage the Acrobat AI assistant. And so think about a salesperson in a company like Adobe, and they are going to get on to a call with a prospect. And what we have here is a document that describes the sales play, right? So here are the questions that you should use as a sales rep to go off and discover the types of value and benefits that we can deliver to our customers and users. They can combine that with the annual report and other public information that's available about this particular prospect that they're about to call on. And then it'll automatically generate high quality conversation starters and questions that are very focused on that specific customer's challenges and opportunities and how their products can help deliver value to the customer's users. So lots of use cases, and we are starting to hear about really innovative ways in which our user community is unearthing value.
Yeah, I think that third use case is super, super compelling, especially when you talk about unlocking, I'd say, data that's critical for a pre-call with a pre-customer call for research purposes. This is one of the things that I see consistently with folks calling me. When we have that data openly available, it's just a matter of being able to consume it the most efficiently. Do you see some kind of, I would say, leverage point for that data eventually to be able to be moved into a CRM to really supercharge a sales process? I think that would be super compelling.
Yeah, and we have obviously the ability today to generate high quality insights and reuse those insights in other environments. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that we can tap into where these users are and make it available. And so if you're a salesperson, you're on the go, you're on a mobile device, this is something that could be super valuable, right? So you can easily copy from here, paste it into your CRM system as notes, and go on. And what you raise is interesting, where we can absolutely look at how we can potentially integrate into these other ecosystems as it relates to document workflows, right? And then again, tying back to that API conversation we had, this is where we can leverage some of our automation tools to be able to do that across many different users and many different documents as well.
Yeah, the possibilities for integration into key systems of record in all these organizations. I mean, that's a great thing to think about in the future, and almost an endless amount of possibilities there and opportunities for Adobe in this area.
Absolutely.
Certainly. So I talk a lot about AI in general at a lot of different conferences with folks, with peers, with folks like yourself. And inevitably, the conversation turns to data security, privacy, because this is a different type of data manipulation of data that we're, in terms of the format that we're used to dealing with structured, regular structured, and unstructured databases. Obviously, you guys have put a great deal of thought into this. I'd love to hear where most of your focus was in those areas.
Yeah, sure. Happy to share our thoughts there. Maybe what might help is if I go back to our overall approach, and we can start there, and I'll get into the security piece as well. And
Perfect.
what we've really tried to do is build upon our history of innovation that we have as it relates to PDFs, and we have had tons of investment in AI and ML even before Gen AI hit the road, and so we have spent tons of IP and effort in making sure that we can understand unstructured data, unstructured layouts of documents better than anyone else. And clearly, PDFs is one of the most common sources of unstructured information. We understand PDFs better than anyone else. We understand how unstructured content is laid out. So think about reading order, right? So if you have a 3-column layout, you and I know that we need to read column 1, then column 2, and column 3. But if you just get a stream of text, it's very hard for machines to figure that out, right? So things that might seem trivial is where we've spent a lot of effort. And so as we think about how we leverage Gen AI with the AI assistant, and think about our approach in as an onion peel, right? And so we get at the core of it, we want to make sure that we are able to bring the power of these large language models, many of which are just commercially available to our users without them having to worry about which one they need to choose for their specific task. So we might have one large language model that is exceptionally good at understanding, let's say, resumes, and a different one that does really well on understanding long research papers with formulae and things like that. The user doesn't have to worry about which one they need to pick. And so the way we have structured this is really to be able to curate the large language model that does best for what the user is trying to do. Then on top of that, we layer our pre-processing and post-processing, where because we understand the structure of these PDFs, we need to ultimately send content and context to these large language models so that it can be processed and the questions can be answered. And so that's where our understanding of PDF structure and content starts to become super critical. And then one of the other things that we do is attribution. And so we found that trust is an important part of all of this, and there is a tremendous amount of, maybe doubt, and you hear these terms like hallucination. And so one of the things that we've focused on really is when you get the responses back, the user can attribute the answers to where it came from in the source documents, and we ground these answers in the source documents. And so we've got some proprietary attribution technology that we built. And that has really resonated with our user community, and they think of that as the most valuable and useful feature. Then we get to kind of the next level in that diagram or that onion peel, where there's the ethics piece of this, and so we go through a ethics review here at Adobe, and there's an ethics committee that makes sure that these products are not putting out harmful content, there is no bias and things like that. So we really put it through the hopper. And so ethics is a big piece of what we bake into the model. And then we have all of the work that we do for security, and that has a few different pieces, security and privacy. So number one is we do not use the customer's data to train any of these language models. And so the customer's data is the customer's data. Yes, it does get processed because the large language model needs context to answer the questions, but it's not used to train any of these models. We don't store any of the customer data within our infrastructure any longer than it needs to be. So while you have a session going on and you're asking questions, this is being processed in the cloud, but we don't store the customer's documents or the prompts, and it all gets deleted after a period of time when the session ends. We are really focused on making this valuable for the individual user. And so you give us documents and we act on those documents. We're not going off there and crawling every other system or repository within your organization or enterprise, or your file folders on your local device for that matter. So there's no unintended data access. You don't have to worry about sharing permissions and things like that. We just focus on the documents that you provide us within the purview of Acrobat. I spoke about the responses being grounded in the documents. That's a big piece of security, privacy, and then also making sure that we can handle trust. And then last but not the least, as we work with enterprise customers, we give the ability for the admins, the IT admins, to control who has access to these capabilities versus not. And so they are able to assign these privileges to the users that are potentially working with maybe not so sensitive documents, but if they have like an R&D department that is working on patent pending stuff, and there's just, while we are secure, I can understand the sensitivity there. They might choose to wait and see what happens before turning it on for those groups. And so these enterprise controls, we believe, are super critical for how organizations will roll this out as well.
Certainly the basis for mass adoption in those organizations, number one. Number two, I think, the controls that you've described, Deepak, are very, very, it gives a lot of confidence, especially when it comes to LLM security. I think a lot of folks understand innately that the types of artificial intelligence examples, they understand the basic controls that may or may not be available around like chat type products like ChatGPT. But I think when it comes to actual model security to protect against hallucinations or model poisoning, which is something that is just becoming a major topic of discussion, I'm confident that the controls that you described are definitely reducing the risk in those areas. It's very encouraging, and it gives a lot of confidence in terms of being able to deploy this in an organization of any size, because you can't watch everything like we used to be able to with regular, like I said, unstructured data sources, even structured data sources, very difficult because everything moves by a factor of 10 in terms of rapidity and also breadth and depth. So that's phenomenal.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, great. This is wonderful. So, uh, next question would be, how are the generative AI beta features different from what other Gen AI service providers are offering? I kind of made allusion to ChatGPT there a little bit, even though I'm sure everybody's sick and tired of hearing about that in the abstract. But I'd love to hear a comparison, from your perspective.
Yeah, sure. Under the covers, there's a lot of choice in these large language models, and um, people do think of them as commodities in the long run. I don't quite use the term commodity per se. They do have a lot of value, but I think the use of them will be democratized, will be widely available. People will know how to use them, and so on and so forth. And so what we've really chosen to work on is making the user experience as awesome as possible. And so because we have 500 million monthly active users that are using Acrobat or Reader across all surfaces, mobile, web, desktop, we can really tap into that user base and give them just this additional value that they never had before. And you think about the possibilities with Reader, you could read a document, but that was it. Maybe you annotate it, maybe you have some comments, but now we're taking it to the next level where this just becomes my system or platform for insights and comprehension, and that value to me is huge. And so that user experience piece is something that we really focus on. Everything from how does a user come in and discover this feature? How do they know what the feature does? One of the things that I was having a conversation with my team about just yesterday is when you ask questions, right? A beginner user will typically ask questions that feel like they're trying to find information, right? Like, what is the answer to X? Like, those are the questions, right? Versus you can get more sophisticated. Like, these models are very sophisticated, and the types of questions you can ask can be much more robust. So, as an example, you might say, imagine you are a reporter for a national publication. If you're trying to create a press release based on all the product innovation that is captured in this 60-page PDF that is coming out in the next release, what would that look like? It'll actually, impersonate that persona. It will use the content in the document and create a very compelling narrative for you, right? And so we want to help users kind of get on that journey and help them understand really the power of what this can do, right? So you'll see features like we have suggested questions as an example, and that's another way of helping these users get to the next level. Then you add to that this notion that we understand unstructured content better than anyone else, and the fact that when you're passing context to these large language models to get answers, you need the best quality context that you're able to pass. And we've really focused on making sure that we can pass the right context because we understand the structure of these unstructured documents, especially PDFs. And that's an area where we are seeing a nice correlation between the quality of the answers, including the attribution, and the ability to understand the structure of these documents. And the third thing I'll say is a little bit looking into the future, is as we think about the types of things people can create out of this. So you can say, write me an email, create a narrative for a presentation, summarize this for a post that I want to put on a social media site like LinkedIn, make it formal, make it informal. Like, there's just a number of possibilities that can help our users truly leverage the power of these Gen AI capabilities. One of the areas that we as Adobe, given we are in the creative business as well, we believe that understanding content and documents is going to be material to the quality of output, both in terms of the content as well as the visual aspects of what that looks like. So we're still scratching the tip of the iceberg on that one, but that's going to be huge for us, just as Adobe.
Yeah, you've made mention a couple of times, which I think is particularly compelling, is that Adobe's got a deep heritage in understanding unstructured content, which is critical because that's the nature of PDFs. I mean, PDFs are in my mind, the de facto artifact in most organizations in terms of information source. So they understanding how to deal with this stuff and just being able to analyze these things comes naturally. It's almost just like a second, like
Yep.
second nature. It's phenomenal. So I've got a couple more questions for you, and one you touched on in terms of creation. Um, so what do you think is going to be next for Adobe AI Assistant? And then if you could weave in there what could be in the future as a rabid Creative Cloud customer, I'd love to see what kind of spillover effects could happen in some of the other areas because I'm so impressed with the way Adobe has assembled the Creative Cloud in general, right? All the different pieces of it. And I certainly at first glance could see some economies of scale or some ways that could be very complementary to use the stuff that you're gleaning from Adobe AI Acrobat Assistant into some of the other areas. I'd love to hear your speculation or, what you might be thinking in terms of your future roadmap.
You're absolutely spot on, Jim. When we think about our roadmap, we have kind of three categories that we are going to be focused on. So one is just this comprehension insights, like how do we get that better, deeper, be able to understand maybe some specific document types better than others. So for example, you could think about investors looking at 10Ks and 10Qs, right? The earnings reports from publicly traded companies. And today we do a pretty good job with what we have, but we could do better if we focus just on that and get even higher quality answers that are very tuned to the use cases and the workflows that these users might have, right? So that's one dimension of making comprehension better. We are currently English only, and so language support is something that is on the roadmap for sure. We will continue to support things like being able to work with just more information, more content, more documents, etc. We spoke about how it can integrate with where these users are with different systems, right? So the possibilities there are really endless. And so that's our focus on comprehension. Then we have a focus on a newer area that is collaboration, and we've had significant increase in the users that are sharing PDFs as links. Right, in the past, folks would just attach a PDF to an email and send it out, and then there's all this back and forth that is happening about the content in the PDFs in email. And what we've really tried to do is make the experience of sharing links with others, and then for those folks to be able to provide feedback on PDFs, which is slightly different because PDFs tend to be final form documents or near final form documents. And you're not really creating it together. You're actually providing feedback. So how do you make that process as easy and seamless as possible? And so those investments have yielded for us, year over year, we are 300% up in terms of link shares. And so we do believe that there's tremendous interest in our user base for sharing links, sharing PDFs as links, and the ability to comment on these PDFs. So you can think about all the things our assistant can do with these shared files, both for the person that is providing feedback. So I can obviously summarize things, I can ask questions, but then I can also start to generate content that will help me write that feedback about these documents. And then for the person that sent the link, when they get all this feedback, for them to be able to process that feedback, figure out action items, what is it that they need to change within these documents, and so on and so forth. So collaboration is yet another big unlock for us. And then really what gets me excited is the creation bucket. I always say I'm not a super creative person, and so anything that Adobe can do to help folks like me, I'm very enthusiastic. And so, as you know, we have Express, which is our product for folks that are everyday folks like me who can go in, knowledge workers, and really start to create visually compelling content. And we have this integration today between Acrobat and Express, where you can bring a PDF into Express and you can stylize it and make it look awesome. Just black and white documents. You can make it more colorful, more visual, fonts. You can put images in there, and so on and so forth. And now you start to think about the possibilities with Gen AI, where if I have let's say I'm doing a report, and I went through all of my comprehension. I got everything collated from 6 or 7 different PDF sources, and then I have content for my report, which is, call it 750 words, and now I'm looking for imagery. Well, we can actually go and automatically generate the prompts for the right images with Firefly that pertain to the content in my report summary. And so that just, again, one example of the types of things we can do. We can extend that to coming up with the right narratives for someone that is trying to put together this content, whether it's a presentation, whether it's a report, and then we can also start to lay them out in ways that give users choices, right? So there may be things that are better represented as an infographic. How can we generate that automatically? So again, just to give you a sense for the types of things that we can do, we have all the tools today as Adobe, and we are in the process of trying to bring all of that together and in ways that that can help users really reimagine how they can leverage the assistant and Gen AI for what they want to accomplish.
Yeah, I think the future is very exciting, especially when you think about the possibilities down the line. I think today, that collaboration piece that you talked about, and especially when it comes to the link sharing feature, that's one we rely heavily on. It's almost a godsend. It cuts down the cycle time for cross commenting on a lot of these PDFs that are shared interdepartmentally here at Dana. I mean,
Well,
we've seen the efficiency. That's fantastic.
that's great to
So
hear.
yeah, it's tremendous. So I think we've covered almost all the areas about Acrobat AI Assistant. Is there anything you'd like to finish up with before we close out?
No, I think this was a great set of questions, Jim, and oftentimes um, I the impact that these technologies create, because I'm lost in my day-to-day execution and operation, and these types of conversations help me come back to oh my gosh, the opportunities here are truly limitless. And so we again believe that these types of technologies, Gen AI technologies within AI Assistant, whether they show up within end user experiences or whether they show up within our APIs as part of our automation story, they have huge potential to unlock net new value. And we definitely believe that just like there were other revolutions in the past, the internet, mobile, Gen AI truly represents a different inflection point in our journey towards productivity and effectiveness. So again, really appreciate the conversation. This was great.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I totally agree with you. I think it's a totally positive mark, and it's a totally positive, I would say, next generation event in our lifetimes. So it's been wonderful. Deepak, thank you so much for taking time today to kind of give us some great insights into the product. I'm certainly excited to see what the future holds for it.
Great. And we
Okay,
would love the feedback, Jim. Thank you.
super. Okay, thanks everybody. It's been wonderful talking with you about Acrobat AI Assistant. So I think we'll close out here. Thanks for joining us.